Our next speaker, Janice Atkinson, MEP, well known to all of us, and is UKIP's antidote to Harriet Harman and political correctness.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my county of Kent. I represent Kent, as you know. Just a couple of things. When the Great Unwashed turn up later on, one thing, I don't mind protest in my county and protest against us. I have no problem with that. We're the third party of politics. We are the official opposition on Kent County Council, and we've got 23 MEPs. But what I really object to in this county is that we've lost 500 frontline police officers, with another 100 coming down the line. And every police officer that's out there today policing this trade union funded rabble is the police taking off our streets and keeping us safe in Kent. Now back on. Before I get into my stride on women, I'm standing in Foxton Hive as a parliamentary candidate. It's a seat that's been held by the Conservatives for 65 years. You know, they had Michael Howard, who actually was a very good constituency MP. No matter what you thought of him and his politics, that's what's coming through loud and clear. As I'm knocking on the doors, the people are really angry about losing their frontline police officers, and they're even angrier about losing their fishing fleets and the decimation of the EU and what they've done to our fishing fleets. I'm going to win that. I'm ahead in the polls. My own polling showing I'm going to win it. And I just ask you, before I get into my stride, come down, get that People's Army marching, and let's turn Foxton Hive purple. So women don't stand for pink. Women stand for red, white and blue. I gave a speech yesterday in a pub down the road, and hundreds of you came, thank you. And in the Daily Mirror today, because there were two of them in there interviewing me, and I'm against feminists, apparently. I'm not against feminists. I'm against the Harriet Harmanistas of this world, the Guardianista feminists. I've spoken about gender quotas before and all-women shortlists, and I'm going to keep on doing so because the threat of legislation from the EU and the political elite in this country still hasn't gone away, and because I believe it's an un-British thing to do. We've got Harriet Harman driving around Yorkshire in a pink van, thinking women respond to gender stereotyping, yet the sisterhood deride gender stereotyping because children's toys and clothes, so much so that major retailers have capitulated to bullying and some no longer stock pink and blue toys. When trying to wriggle out of the patronising pink debate at the launch of the Women's Campaign, Gloria Di Piero, the MP and Shadow Minister of Women and Equalities, so she thought the colour was cerise. And Miss Harman, the High Priestess of the Guardianista Feministas, said it was magenta. It's patronising, it's double standards, and we're not putting up with it. And by the way, when we're in government, we won't be having a Minister for Women and Equalities. Yet the political elite keep dictating to us, saying that we should have gender quotas because they've introduced them in the Labour Party, and they think the rest of us should have them too. During the European elections, the Shadow Cabinet visited the former mining villages of Dover, here in Kent. The London Liberal elite got quite a shock. They used to take their votes for granted. They used to weigh them and not count the votes. The membership of the Labour Party was very angry at having an imposed gender quota on them for their European selection list. So what did they do? 50% of those ex-miners and mining villages and their families voted UKIP. They voted for me. And not that the other parties are any better. The Conservatives and Liberal Democrats They also pander to a small number of niche lobby groups who shout very loudly about what they want. One MP in the Conservative Party who was involved with encouraging women to come forward for office was none other than Brooks Newmark. You remember him, the one who took selfies of his private parts whilst languishing in a paisley dressing gown. I suppose that's one way of attracting women into politics. To propel women forward just because they're women is no more apparent than where I sit in the European Parliament, where there's a powerful lobby group called the European Women's Lobby. In 2011, this group received £1.1 million of euros to fund them. It's European taxpayers' cash, and that's partly British cash as well. It's well funded, it pays high salaries, and has membership support from Angela Merkel's MEPs, the Liberals, the Greens, and the Socialists. Their Secretary-General, Joanna Maycock, who's a Brit, blames the Spanish economic meltdown and austerity on macho men. It's all the men's fault, she says. She lamented on TV show that I also took part in how different it might have been if they had managed to get gender quotas. And then the maitre d' of the women's movement in Brussels is Viviane Reding. She's a former EU commissioner and now an MEP in Angela Merkel's party. She was also on the same TV programme, but wouldn't go head-to-head with me. I do ask these people to go head-to-head with me, no matter what the subject is, and they all decline to do so because their arguments are weak. Her take on why there aren't any more women in politics and the boardroom, listen to this. Number one, we're losing talented women because they have to do housework. Well, here's a novel idea, Viviane. Hand the duster to the men and the hoovers to the husbands and get them to do it. Two, she thinks that women who have no children are blocked for promotion. Yes, this is from a supposedly very serious politician. And number three, she believes in quotas will allow women to compete and not be put in the corner. Well, I don't know about you ladies, but I've never been put in a corner. But I say to these women who make up the London liberal elite and the EU, most of them who's never actually worked in the private sector, have you actually asked what ordinary women want, rather than just chatting amongst yourselves in the little bubble that you exist in? Have you asked the woman that works in Tesco's whether she spends her time on the checkout, wondering what the gender balance is now that Sir Terry Leahy has left the board? No, like us, if she has ambitions, she's probably thinking about whether she can be a store manager one day. And we know that the retail sector has an excellent record in helping women to succeed, if they want to. We have to address the pipeline of women coming through the companies and support them with mentoring for those that actually want to succeed. Give them profit and loss accounts and put them in charge of staff and train them. It's called leadership succession, and women are just as capable as men if we have the same opportunities and support. And remember too, we don't all want to be like Karen Brady or Jacqueline Goals of this world. A lot of women choose to seek promotion, an awful lot of them don't either. And a lot of them don't want to be MEPs or MPs. They don't want to stick their heads above the parapet like we're doing at the moment, only to be shot down. It's a hard life, believe me, sometimes. Putting a quota system on business is also unrealistic. UKIP is determined to help funnel more scientists, engineers, medics and technology experts into training to fill the skills gap. That's why men and women taking degrees in these courses will be given free tuition fees under UKIP. But how do you actually get more women into the boardroom if they're actually imposing 40% gender quotas? What about those industries like North Sea diving, heavy engineering, electronics and the motor trade? Where are we going to get at least 40% of women quotas when there are no women working in those businesses? I tell you how, though. The same few women will be sitting on umpteen boards. The rest of us won't get a chance. This is a policy that could make a few women very rich, the same liberal London elite that swill around our boardrooms. Girls and boys are supposed to be educated in the same way. They make their own choices. Some are pushed down more stereotypical gender route. But you can't force girls and boys to make career choices to make up a gender-balanced quota. I recently attended a gender quota conference. Yes, there are such things, and one of the participants was Gordon Brown's favourite pollster, Deborah Mattinson, who runs Britain Thinks. She recently published a comprehensive study of men and women's attitudes to gender quotas. She found that across all classes and gender, the result was an outstanding no, except in the public sector, where there are a small majority of women in favour of quotas. When Deborah turned to the mainly female audience, she said, quite indignantly, "Well, I'm dismayed, and I bet you are too." She was rather surprised at the audience's quite audible no's and shaking of heads. They didn't want positive discrimination or gender quotas. But that's what the chattering political classes don't get. They don't understand what women want. But then I suppose Ms. Mattison did ask them, even though she gave the wrong answer. But that won't stop Deborah or Harriet or out of the touch Westminster and EU elite pushing for them. That's up to us. We all want women to succeed, and in UKIP, women get a very real chance to succeed. We're very equal. But usually those same politicians and journalists who claim to want to promote women actually do precisely the opposite. If we want to see more women in politics and the way the media reports politics, it has to change. Many of my female friends and business associates think I'm mad to do what I do. They wouldn't no more consider entering frontline politics than they would cut off their own arm. They're appalled at the way women politicians are treated, the way our lives are picked apart by the media, which, by the way, is a very British thing. I've learnt that much by talking to the British MEPs in the European Parliament. Our hair, our cleavage, our clothes, for some reason, they think they have a right to comment on. Our families are chased for scandals, and our private lives are picked over and spat out. My hair has been described as coiffured, my nails blood red. Editorials call me a mum of two. I was once asked by a so-called serious paper, do I prefer heels or flats? When did you ever hear of a male politician described as a father, let alone a father of how many? Or routine column inches on his choice of suits or brogues versus slip-ons? They don't treat the men like this. Apart from the travel, though, the European Parliament has quite a good attitude to debating and voting times. It's more like a normal working day in business, unlike our own Parliament, which, despite the attempts at reform, is still set up for the men. It suits those that have other paid employment, like the Rifkins and the Straws of this world, on cosy company boards, and they like to sit around in a gentleman's rich club in the evening. Most women, actually, don't want that, and the system has to change. But colleagues, UKIP's women's problem, trumped up by our enemies, doesn't actually exist. Most of our women MPs are spokesmen on serious briefs. Our deputy chairman is a woman. And the most inconvenient truth of all is that a quarter of our MEPs are women, chosen by you. One person, one vote, and 25% of our intake are women MEPs. Well done, you. That's actually more in percentage terms than any other party in the EU Parliament, and not a gender quota or an all-women shortlist in sight. Now, UKIP believes in women. We believe we can encourage and support women without quotas. We believe in non-discrimination, and we believe that Britain does too. So if you believe in Britain, if you believe in women, please vote UKIP.